Feel free to comment or interrupt anytime you guys want, and I'll jump into the chat when I'm able. All right. Jared Winsome turned his 7-year-old Chrysler I don't think I came anywhere near spelling that correctly. Well, there you go. There's no T. I would have spelled it with a T, but again, they didn't ask me. Jared Winsome turned his 7-year-old Chrysler off the gravel path onto a rutted dirt incline that threatened to tear out his undercarriage almost exactly 2 months since he carved the first dead girl out of a piece of driftwood. Her name had been Sarah Beadle. All right. Nobody can spell that correctly. Thanks, man. Even though it's not true, I appreciate the support. Her name was Sarah Beadle. Jared only made a small amount of money from the carvings, but he was starting to make a name for himself. If the ethereal image of poor dead Sarah had looked anything like her, he'd probably be in jail for the crime himself. The car got stuck in a deep rut, but he powered through and continued up the rough incline, deeper into the woods. The name, no, let's say Sarah's name. Sarah's name had come to him. Sarah's name had come to him as he polished the piece shiny. All right. Wasn't the name. Let's take out that 3. No reason to put numbers in the middle of words. It wasn't the name of the piece. Again, that would have gotten him in trouble. In real trouble. It was Angel on the Ground. No, I need the... And sold quite well. Then he read in the paper about Sarah's body being found down at the beach. She had been killed somewhere else. Jared knew it had been up in these woods. The same way he knew her name from the carving. Connie Von Hart was the next dead girl. He topped the hill only to find more woods and more rough trail. He kept going. The piece that represented Connie was from Darkwood, gathered from this very area. I have a question. When I'm writing, I tend to say he or she a lot. How often do you think you should use the name of the protagonist at least once a paragraph? That varies a lot. There's nothing wrong with he and she. In fact, if you got two characters of two different genders, that can save you a lot of time and a lot of confusion for the reader, because you can use he and she. I tend to go back and forth between the name and the pronoun simply for variety. So there's not really a specific reason necessarily, unless I'm trying to remind the reader of who we're dealing with. Here we got a few different female names because, of course, he's carving these girls out of wood and then finding out that something bad happened to them. So I'm sticking to the names a little bit more because we're moving pretty rapidly. I mean, you can see in just this little space here that we're moving between names pretty fast, so the names become a little bit more important. I wouldn't stress too much about he and she, other than, like you said, use the name every once in a while. Sometimes once per paragraph is good. I got really short, abrupt paragraphs here, so that might get a little old if I do it all the time. Especially if you're moving between characters, you just want to establish the name before the next section, and then if it runs a little long, establish the name again so that the readers know which character you're talking about. So other than clarity and other than variety, there's no real hard or fast rule about using the pronouns or not. And as long as it's not terribly distracting, I wouldn't stress about it too much, unless you feel like that it's messing up the rhythm of the story by using the pronoun over and over again, which is a possibility. And again, intercutting the name just to change it up usually solves that pretty well. Also, you can use other identifying characteristics, including their profession, other details about them in place of name and in place of pronoun. And especially if you're kind of desperate for variety or whatever, you can do that. Like the officer said this or that, if that's the profession that they tend to have, and that gives you one more identifier to break up the name and the pronouns. Again, most of it has to do with flow and how it reads and all that. A lot of times I wouldn't worry about it in the first draft. I would just get it written, and then if you notice in the edits that the pronoun's standing out to you a lot, that's when you might start changing things around. The piece that represented Connie was from Darkwood, gathered from this very area. It was called Lost in the Magic Wood. Waited and waited to read about her in the paper. But then he met her at church, alive and well. Jared kept his distance, but did watch her. She was visiting an aunt. And she went missing about a week ago. He had no idea when her body would show up or where, but she had died not far from here. He topped the next rise with branches scraping both sides of his car. And there was a tan van parked in a wide spot in the trail. One of the side doors was open. He drove a little further and turned off his engine. The third carving was Last Chance. And it brought up the name Rhonda Tulip. She was local and went missing from her teaching job that afternoon. Less than an hour ago. So Jared immediately drove up here. As he got out of the car, he heard a scream and then a lower, gruff voice in a scolding tone. He rounded the van on the open side in a full run. Damn, he wished. Also happy to see you and your family are safe from the hurricane. Thank you, sir. He tried his best to get us both when we were in different states, but we made it through okay. I do need to clean out the refrigerator because the power was off too long, but I gotta gather up energy for any kind of chore. He rounded the van on the open side in a full run. Damn, he wished that guy was smaller. His life might be in danger too. The guy was heavy, masked, and solid. Still, Jared surprised him and managed to barrel him over. Rhonda was alive but bleeding. It took him 3 tries to get her to stand and start moving away from the van. She collapsed and he carried her. The big guy was up and coming after them. Jared managed to get the door open. With her in his arms and tossed her over the center console into the passenger seat. He started the car on the second try, shifted into reverse, and carefully moved backward between trees. Ugh, okay. Sorry, I got a text. I had a bunch of blood work done. Everything came back negative, which I know should be a positive. You know, they're testing me for all the zebras, but that leaves me not knowing what's wrong with me. And I'm in rough shape, so I'm hoping they figure something out soon. I don't know what to do next, though. Alright, let's finish the story. That's what I'll do next. He started the car on the second try, shifted into reverse, and carefully moved backward between the trees. Faster. Rhonda said. Jared rolled them down the slope. If we hit a tree, we'll be stuck out here with faster, she screamed. The masked man struck the windshield on Jared's side. Alright, also happy to see, okay, there. Should pacing be visual? By that I mean when the action speeds up, should the paragraph breaks become more frequent, or does the description take priority? You can write it any way you want. Now, if you talk to people who are smart and successful, they will say that shorter sentences, even sometimes some sentence fragments used strategically, will do a lot to pace up the action. I like to mix it in and kind of alter the pace some, so it's not all fast. Like the fact that he's having to back up more slowly and carefully than he probably would like. Also, as I'm giving the backstory, he was in the midst of driving up through the woods, so sort of we were in the midst of the action, even though some of that was just a placeholder to get the basic backstory out before we got into the fight. Well, I'm talking to you, who is smart and successful. Thank you so much, Tom. You're really helping me out here. But generally speaking, shorter paragraphs, more breaks, shorter sentences tend to speed up the action. I still think variety is important too, so you can have a longer sentence that has a lot of visceral detail to it. So especially sensory detail, fear details, things like that. That faster pace, or like a longer sentence with a lot of that just kind of words that dig their nails into the reader, making them afraid or making them feel trapped, can help out with that speedy pace as well. So it's almost the same as any other kind of writing, in the sense that variety helps point out the fast-paced sentences a little bit more. The quality of the detail in the smallest amount of space is good too. So it's not that you want a lot of detail. You want useful detail, powerful detail in the midst of these very quick sentences. And those things put in strategically can really put the reader into the moment. A lot of times it's in the edits that I get that right. So very often in the first draft, I don't necessarily capture that completely, just trying to get the story structure down. So generally speaking, chopping up the narrative a little bit, using shorter sentences, even some sentence fragments, can help give the illusion of speed and haste in the story. But the right amount of description in the right places can add variety, as well as do a better job of immersing the reader into these sort of action scenes. I've done an entire book that was just one long action scene for NaNoWriMo, but generally speaking, the action scenes have more power when they are sort of isolated between other things. You can really slow a story down by having long narrative and introspection and stuff between the action scenes. It doesn't necessarily ruin the story, but it Bloodfist, that's right. It doesn't necessarily ruin the story, but it can throw off the pace, especially for a reader that enjoys your action scenes. So you kind of have to decide what kind of story it is, but generally speaking, quick and choppy it better conveys action, especially a hectic action scene, than long description does. But again, I try to change it up so it's not the same every single time. The masked man struck the windshield on Jared's side with the point of the blade, cracking the glass sharp web, but not breaking it. Jared pressed the gas and retreated faster. The man stumbled. He stared through the eye holes. Before turning to run back to his van. They bounded over the ruts, and the Chrysler bottomed out several times. How did you find me? Rhonda asked. Was collecting wood. Jared lied. Who was that guy? Monster. She whispered and looked away. They backed onto the gravel, and he turned to drive forward toward the pavement again. The van topped the hill at awful speed and bounded toward them. Jared spun the tires through the gravel. Jared spun the tires through the gravel before catching traction and racing away. He's after us, she said. Speed up. He did. Rhonda was bleeding onto his seat now. Jared barely slowed as he hit the pavement and turned toward town, throwing sparks. They both watched in the rear view as the van paused at the turn. A couple more seconds and it turned away deeper into the hills. No, hold on. She let out a haggard breath. You should have gotten the plate. Jared said. Did you get the plate number to the van? Rhonda started crying and covered her face with both hands. Tears turned to wild sobs. He drove her toward the police station without asking. Didn't want to give her the chance to say no about reporting this. What about the next girl? What about the next carving? How long before the police started asking questions he couldn't answer? Jared sped up again before he lost his nerve.